Hey, what's up guys, it's DarkArmedDuelist, and today we're going to be doing a Gravekeeper deck profile. So I'm really excited for this one because this deck is absolutely crazy and is really fun to be able to play around with, especially with how old the Gravekeeper archetype is, because this deck is actually, like, the archetype is almost as old as Yu-Gi-Oh! Like, I think they first started coming out in Pharaonic Guardian, which it was like the 6th or 7th set, I mean the 8th set of Yu-Gi-Oh! So it was one of the first sets of Yu-Gi-Oh! This deck even was like released, and it's gotten a lot of retrains and added cards to the set, but a lot of the old cards are still really crazy and still really good in this deck. So without further ado guys, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell there so you can become part of the notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below for all those awesome rewards, like getting your name in the description for a single video, getting a signed card sent in the mail, or even getting to request a deck profile every single month to your patron, along with test hands. So without further ado, let's get straight on into this. So first off, we're going to be playing 3 copies of Gravekeeper Commandant, and don't ask me why he's not a dark monster, because the rest of them are all dark. So what this card does is you discard this card from your hand to add 1 Necro Valley from your deck to your hand, which is a really powerful effect because you're basically playing 6 copies of Necro Valley at that point, which super helps out the deck for consistency. We then play 3 copies of Gravekeeper Spiritualist. Gravekeeper Spiritualist is ridiculously good as well, because this card is basically a walking polymerization, because during your main phase, if Necro Valley is on your field, then you can summon a spellcaster monster from your extra deck using this card you control and another monster from your hand or field as a fusion material to fusion summon that monster, which is pretty good. We then play 3 copies of Gravekeeper Headman. Gravekeeper Headman is if this card is summoned, then you get to target a level 4 Gravekeeper monster in your graveyard and special summon an attack position or face down defense position. You only effect this card once per turn, and this card is unaffected by Necro Valley, which is great because if it was, that would be awful. We then play 3 copies of Gravekeeper's Recruiter. Gravekeeper's Recruiter is when this card is sent to the graveyard, you can add a Gravekeeper monster with 1500 defense or less from your deck to your hand, which is a really great effect and really helpful for this deck. I'm playing this card at 3 because I was playing it previously at 2, but there's actually a Link monster that I started playing in the deck that actually makes this really easy to be a searcher on normal summon. So I bumped it up to 3 because essentially you can normal summon this, link it away for a Link 1, and then immediately search your copy of Recruiter, or off Recruiter you can search Commandant, and then Commandant will immediately let you discard to grab Necro Valley, which is pretty good. We then play for the other Gravekeeper monsters. We're playing a single copy of Gravekeeper Shaman. Gravekeeper Shaman is really, really good in this deck because this card gains 200 defense for each Gravekeeper monster in the graveyard and negate the effects of all cards that activate in the graveyard except Gravekeeper monsters. And then while Necro Valley is on the field, your opponent cannot activate field spell cards, and also field spell cards cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects, which is really, really good to be able to protect your copy of Necro Valley. We then play a single copy of Gravekeeper Oracle. Gravekeeper Oracle is a 1-of to me because I'm basically using this card to go into my copy of Supernaturalist. Supernaturalist is really good in the deck, but the main reason that you play this is because you want to send it to graveyard because it is a level 10 monster and it will make your copy of Supernaturalist go up by 1,000, but it does have a neat effect that you can tribute 3 monsters or a single Gravekeeper to tribute summon this card but not set it. And then when this card is tribute summoned, you can activate effects equal to the amount of Gravekeeper monsters tributed to summon this card. If you just tributed 1, then you get to gain attack equal to the combined levels of all monsters tributed for the tribute summon of this card times 100. Destroy all set monsters your opponent controls, or all monsters your opponent currently control lose 2,000 attack and defense, which is pretty good. Like, you get to pick those effects, which one you want to activate, which is pretty good. We then play 3 copies of Magician's Soul because Magician's Soul is just ridiculously good in this deck. You get to send 2 spells and traps from your hand and or field to the grave to draw that many cards that you sent, and then also you can, if this card's in your hand, then you can send a level 6 or higher spellcast type monster from your deck to the graveyard to activate one of these effects. Either special summon this card or special summon Dark Magician or Dark Magician Girl from the graveyard. Usually you're just going to immediately special summon this card to be able to get it on your side of the field and send something to the graveyard like your copy of your Gravekeeper Shaman to be able to just immediately special summon it and then link summon it away. We then play a single copy of Dark Magician and a single copy of Red Eyes Black Dragon. Basically, these are here to use to go into Red Eyes Dark Dragoon, because Red Eyes Dark Dragoon is really good in this deck. Once you establish Necro Valley and your copy of Red Eyes Dark Dragoon, with a bunch of the set cards that back up this deck, you're pretty much set for the game. So that's it for the monsters, guys. Let's get into the spells. So for the spells, we're going to be playing a single copy of Red Eyes Fusion. It's basically here to go into your copy of Red Eyes Dark Dragoon. Yeah, you do play it in this particular deck. You don't have to. You can drop it out if you want to. It is a 40 2-card deck, I believe. So you can drop the Red Eyes Fusion and the 2 copies of the Red Eyes and the Dark Magician out of the deck. It'd be 39. And then you can just put another copy of a counter trap, like for example, another copy of Imperial Tomb of Necro Valley. And it would get you to the 40 cards if you don't want to play Red Eyes or the copy of Red Eyes Dark Dragoons in the deck. So you can go that route. We then play a single copy of Magical Eyes Fusion. I would recommend playing the Magical Eyes Fusion regardless if you choose to play Dragoons or not, because this card can help you go into Quintet Magician, and it can also help you go into Supernaturalist as long as Necro Valley is not on the field, because Necro Valley will not allow you to move cards from places except with their own effect. So you can't actually use this while you have Necro Valley on the field, but you can use it later on if you need to, if you don't have Necro Valley or you do it before Necro Valley. We then play 3 copies of Pot of Extravagance because it just helps you dig into the deck a little bit deeper to get you some more plays in this particular deck, because you really do need to dig in the deck, and this card is super helpful. It doesn't really matter because you're not going to draw cards outside of this. If you want to change it out for 3 Allure of Darkness just to make the deck a little bit more budget, you can. We then play 3 copies of Necro Valley. Necro Valley is insane. It makes all of your Gravekeepers go up by 500 attack and defense. It also makes it so that neither player can move cards from the graveyard except with their own effects, and cards cannot be banished. And also, it's just a really amazing card. Like, this card is super old, it's super cool, and I really love playing this card in this deck. We then play 3 copies of Necro Valley Throne. Necro Valley Throne is the searcher of the deck. It lets you add 1 Gravekeeper from your deck to your hand, or immediately after the card resolves, you normal summon a Gravekeeper, which can get you a link to go into Anaconda to then go into Dragoons really easily. But basically, adding any Gravekeeper from your deck to your hand is just really good in this deck. We then play 3 of the most broken card in the entire deck, and that is 3 copies of Royal Tribute. This card says, if you control Necro Valley, both players must discard any monsters in their hand. That is really, really good just to make both players discard every single card in their hand. I love playing this card, and it is so good. It is so good to be able to just immediately activate this card if you control Necro Valley, and then just make your opponent ditch their entire hand. So that's it for the spells, guys. Let's get into the traps. If you resolve this, it can almost be a game win, which is what's amazing. So for the traps, we're playing a single copy of Imperial Tomb of Necro Valley. Imperial Tomb of Necro Valley is basically Solemn Judgment for this deck, and what it does is when a spell or trap or monster effect is activated, while both a Gravekeeper monster and Necro Valley are on the field, negate the activation if you destroy it. You can activate this card once per turn. So again, like I said before, if you want to drop the Red Eyes and the Dark Magician, it would carry it to 40, and then you drop Red Eyes Fusion, and you can actually play a second one of these and carry it back to 40 and be totally fine without the Dragoons package. I like the Dragoons package, and I know a lot of people are going to like it, but it is a kind of a card that's kind of weird. So if you don't want to play it, you can play another one of these. We then play a single copy of Necro Valley Temple. I've actually bumped this card from 2 to 1 in this build, because I feel like I'm not having a problem so much with establishing Necro Valley, and it's searchable in this deck. So when a Gravekeeper monster or Necro Valley are both on the field, monster opponent control lose 500 attack and defense, which Necro Valley makes them go up by 500, so it makes it a gap of about 1,000 between yours and your opponent's monsters. And then during the main phase, if you control no cards in your field spell zone, you can activate a Necro Valley directly from your hand and or graveyard, and if this card in your possession is destroyed by an opponent's card effect and sent to the graveyard, you can send a Necro Valley directly, or set a Necro Valley spell or trap directly from your deck, except another copy of itself, which can be Imperial Tomb. So it's really, really good just to be able to use this card as a one of. I think this card is an absolute one of. I may play 2. I kind of bounce between 1 and 2, but I really am liking 1. We then played 2 copies of Storming Mirror Force, because the Storming Mirror Force is really hard to deal with your opponent. It's like kind of like the sand winds over the desert, just stopping your opponent with this deck. It just works. I really like the way this card plays in the deck, because it basically shuffles all monsters back into the hand that are in attack position, which is really nice. And then I also play 2 copies of Quaking Mirror Force, because it flips all my opponent's monsters down into face down defense. And it kind of reminds me of the sand, like quicksand, so I figured it would go with like the theme. I thought that was kind of neat. But what this card does is when an opponent's monster declares an attack, you change all your opponent's attack position monsters to face down defense. It doesn't work on links, but it works on a lot of other cards, so this card is a 2 of to me. I really like playing this card in the deck, and it really helps out a lot of my plays. Just to be able to put my opponent's monsters face down is just really, really good. We then play 3 copies of Solemn Judgment. Solemn Judgment is really fun in this deck too, because Solemn Judgment basically says no to everything. So I play this card as a 3 of in the deck, because it just says no when your opponent's going to summon a monster or a spell or trap is activated. You can pay half your life points, or when a monster would be summoned at all, you just pay half your life points and then negate it. And as long as you haven't lost the game, you always have half to pay with Judgment Judgment. So that's it for the main deck, guys. Let's get into the extra deck. So since this is an extravagance build, we're going to be playing a lot of 3 of, so keep that in mind. So we're going to open up with 3 copies of Gravekeeper Spiritualist. This card is pretty good in the deck. It takes 2 Gravekeeper monsters and it gains attack and defense equal to combined level of the monsters that was used to this card times 100. So it can go up by about, usually it's going up by 1200 because I'm putting my copy of Oracle at 10 and then a Spiritualist at 4. So it's usually about 12 that I'm putting into this. Or 14, excuse me. 10 plus 4 is 14. And so sometimes it's all the way up to, that amount, up to 3,400 that this card is coming out at. And then you put your Necro Valley on top of it, and it goes to 39, which is pretty good. It also has the ability that you can activate the effect this turn or during the main phase. You can activate the effect that during the end phase of this turn, you get to add 1 Gravekeeper monster or Necro Valley card directly from your deck to your hand, which is pretty good to get you a search during the end phase. I wish that it wasn't during the end phase and it was on summon, it would add that card, but hey, it still gets you a card. We then play 3 copies of Red Eyes Dark Dragoons. The Dragoons are just really good as another boss monster for the deck. To be able to summon to your side of the field and just be able to look at your opponent and go, nope, negate. And then pop 2 cards against your opponent, 2 monsters against your opponent. Can't be targeted by card effects and can't be destroyed by card effects either, which is pretty good to be able to do. And it goes to 4K on negation, which is just really nice. I play a single copy of Quintet. Quintet comes out every so often, which is why I play it as a 1-of in this particular deck. I just really feel like 1 is fine for me. If you don't play the Dragoons, you can bump Quintet up to 2 or 3. And basically what this card does is during late game, you'll use your Magicalized Fusion to fusion summon into this card. If you don't have Necro Valley on your field, to give you an additional kind of boss monster to board wipe your opponent, because it's really easy to put 5 spellcasters with different names in this deck to be able to just go after your opponent with this card. We then play 3 copies of Anaconda. Anaconda is just really good. It doesn't want buns. You pay 2,000, you summon Dragoons, essentially. We play 3 copies of Artemis because Artemis is really, really good in this deck. And what Artemis basically does for the deck is you're going to basically normal summon Recruiter, link the Recruiter away, summon Artemis, and then search Necro Valley, or search Commandant, and then search Necro Valley, which is already going to give you 2 spellcasters in Graveyard. And if you have Magicalized Fusion in hand, you can actually use the Magicalized Fusion to go into a copy of your Supernaturalist or Spiritualist before you actually go into Necro Valley, before you lay Necro Valley on the field, so you can then get a really good field set up off your copy of Artemis. We then play a single copy of Unicorn and a single copy of IP Masquerena, which if you want to change any of these cards in the extra deck, you can bump the IP Masquerena and the Unicorn up by a couple of copies. If you want to, it's totally up to you if you want to go that route, but it is an option for you guys. Like, for example, if you don't want to play the Dragoons in this particular build, you can bump Quintet up, you can bump these up to 3 each, which will carry a 4, and then bump the Quintet up to 3, which will carry it all the way up to 6 to replace the Dragoons if you want to. So that's it for this particular deck, guys. I highly recommend if you guys have not played Gravekeepers, you definitely should. It's a very counter-based deck that what you're trying to do against your opponent. It's very spell and trap negation, like you're trying to use a lot of your spell and traps. I really feel like the battle traps are the way to go in this particular build because the deck doesn't have a lot of protection from battle, and basically what you're trying to do is just stop your opponent from attacking you while you're shutting their graveyard down to eventually whittle down their life points with a big Supernaturalist, which is really, really nice, or Dragoons, depending on which way you want to go. It's just really, really nice. So that's it for this one, guys. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell in there so you can become part of the notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below, and we'll see you guys in the next video. See you later, guys.